Continuing with our build series focused on ease of access for new and returning players, we have the ever-popular Hammerdin build. This is one of the strongest builds in the game, and one that can carry you through Nightmare and Hell with little to no problems. For this video, we're going to assume that you made your way through normal using one of the beginner build guides, and are going to use your Nightmare respec from the Den of Evil to switch over to this build. Though as an early comment, I would actually wait until you farmed the basic runes mentioned in this video before making the switch. It will make your life orders of magnitude easier. As usual, let's get the stats out of the way. For the most part, while running budget and solo self-found gear, this build won't need more than 70 strength, though you may need to do some adjustment depending on what Paladin shield you end up using. Most of your normal and exceptional choices will be relatively light, and all Paladin shields of sufficient item level can have the sockets we need. The rest of the gear is just like any caster. Now, there is a bit of a difference with this build in that we will want to use Holy Shield and go for some block, so that we will basically be able to survive being in the middle of a group of enemies. So after placing our skill points, adjust our dexterity for blocking percentage. It doesn't need to be maxed out all the time, especially not in Nightmare, but you will want to get to the 70% plus range in Hell while Holy Shield is active, and the requirement for this will rise as you gain levels. Everything else, just stick into Vitality. In terms of skills, we're looking at Blessed Hammer and Holy Shield. Basic, very simple. And while the attack pattern for this will take some getting used to for high-end play, just casting a handful of hammers, moving a few steps, casting some more hammers, etc. is going to be fine for most players. Since we are doing respecs, the first skill you want to dump into should obviously be 20 points into Blessed Hammer right off the bat, or whatever max you can get it to if you got to this point early. You do want 1 point in Holy Shield, and then alternating 1 point in Concentration and 1 point in Vigor until both are maxed, and then you can start putting points into Blessed Aim for more damage. During all of this, I like putting 1 point into Redemption as well for clearing corpses, since this will be important, especially against greater mummies in Hell, where you want to rob them of potential allies, but this is an optional addition that not all players would agree with. The formula for the budget Hammerdin is pretty much running Concentration and spamming hammers, then switching to Vigor to run between places. Though since Blessed Hammer is pure magical damage, Smite and your Mercenary will basically be your big friends for dealing with magic immunes. Thankfully, there are only a few magic immunes in the game, and while most of them can be gotten rid of using Holy Bolts, which is an alternate strategy, like mummies and greater mummies can be killed by this, you do need to use Smite or another skill to deal with Wailing Beasts in Act 3 Hell if you want Lam Essam's Tome. Otherwise, nothing will really stand up to the damage of your hammers because there are very few truly magic immune enemies. In terms of Mercenary for this, the hands down best choice is going to be an Act 2 defensive Mercenary with Holy Freeze and an Insight Polearm, which is Ral, Tyr, Tal, and Soul in a non-magical 4-socket polearm. Then as far as armor and helmet, Life Leech and Resist are what you're going to want to focus on, whether this is using Treachery armor and Tal Rasha's mask, or Smoke armor and a Blood helm. It doesn't matter. Those are just what you want to focus on to make your Mercenary survive longer and keep your mana income up with the meditation from Insight. Thankfully, the gear for this build is super simple. On the weapon, you'll want to get a 4-socket one-handed sword, the easiest of which is just grabbing a basic white broadsword from normal cows or anywhere in Nightmare and use the socketing formula on it for a 50% chance of 4 sockets. The formula for that being Ral, Am, and a perfect amethyst plus a sword. Note, we're saving our normal socket quest for the shield since it's harder to find, but throw Tal, Thol, Ort, and Am in the sword, regardless of how you got it 4 sockets, and now you have faster cast, plus 2 skills, and a lot of other useful mods, but we don't stop there. Because next, you want to find a 4-socket Paladin shield. Again, hunt Nightmare for these, preferably one with Resist naturally on it. We don't need to be super picky, but if you want to save some dexterity, the taller ones give better base block on the normal and exceptional variants of these shields, and if you do remake a spirit later on in your shields, the Sacred Shield does give the highest overall block, just they don't appear until late Nightmare into Hell. Now, we want to use the Larzik quest on this if we don't find one of these with a natural 4 sockets and the stats we want. Reason we save it for this is these shields will drop less than broadswords. If you happen to find a 4-socket one of these, don't be afraid to use the socket quest on your broadsword though, because, well, then you actually have the quest to spare. Again, we do want to put Spirit in this. Again, Tal, Thol, or Am. This gives us another plus 2 skills, even more faster cast, and since it's in a shield, it gives us some resists, as well as, you know, the faster recovery and stuff, all that fun stuff. Now, as far as armor, I pretty much just stick with stealth from normal, Tal and Eth in a 2-socket armor. It saves me on resources and gives faster casts as well, so you can really just spam hammers. But if you find yourself needing more resist, smoke is an option with Neff and Lum, though due to cost, you're probably not going to be finding any good plus skill armor outside of uniques and sets for the Hammerdin until postgame, but there are a few of those, like Viper Magi being an especially nice one with +1 skills, some resists, and cast rate. Helmet-wise, you're pretty much wanting lore, ort, and soul, and whatever cheap helm you can get. +1 all skills, lightning resist, and a pinch of mana per kill is going to be hard to beat on a budget. Obviously, there are some unique helms that are better, but this is just so easy to get and so useful that I'd be hard-pressed not to mention it. Nearly as much as stealth armor, you should usually just keep one of these in your shared stash if you're on Resurrected, or just keep it in your mules if you're not. Now, since we're using Amethyst, rolling for sockets in the sword in some cases, we may not have the resources for a caster belt, because, well, you need that sword a lot more than you need a caster belt. But if you do have spare Amethyst, that's going to be the first pick on the slot because faster casts and good mods. Just use a magic shark skin or vampire fang belt for the 4 rows, with a perfect amethyst, a junk jewel, and an ith rune. If you cannot get this, any 4-row belt will usually work, just nab something with resist. Heck, there's even some pure magic belts that can be okay. Stats and resist should be your goal though. Gloves and boots are in a similar state. You either want to craft safety gloves and boots, or just go with whatever rare and magic ones you can find or gamble for. And thankfully this character is fairly good at building up gold thanks to being a caster with very little overhead. So don't be afraid to gamble up for those slots, as well as for jewelry. Because with jewelry, I would do the same as we did with the gloves and boots. Just focus on resist and stats unless you can find a good unique or something in their spot. If you by some miracle have spare amethyst, even after all the other gear, this should be your lowest priority by the way, you could consider crafting a caster amulet, but I wouldn't burn too many resources on it since you'll likely find rare or magic amulets that can compete with it for the most part. Thankfully, faster cast is available as a native mod, even without crafting on amulets and rings, though you might be reaching a point where actual breakpoint percents might not being reached, since you have a lot already elsewhere. So check the breakpoint charts to be sure before you really waste resources on this. And also, you're not going to be able to get, say, +2 skill amulets until way later into the post game with crafting. And that's all your gear. Obviously, charms will help round out the resists as you go too, the most important one being lightning resist, but having them all max is pretty easy for this build. If you're wondering the reason why you went with this rather than Zeal, mainly because this build is noticeably easier to get through Hell and build up resources for your other characters with. This and the Sorceress are peak Hell farmers. Pretty much they can go a lot of places and get you the items you need. And as always, a special thanks to the patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers for making these videos possible so we don't have to chase the best or broken algorithm with every video, and instead give useful, real, usable gameplay tips.